Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing the expansion for Kemet Rise of Gods. We're going to dive into what the expansion adds, talking about all the various things, some of which I have, some of which I don't have, some of which I have but have not played. We'll get into all of that, but first the usual notes. This is a, well, I was going to say this is a prototype. This is a base game of the original Kemet, or the Kemet Blood and Sand. We're getting into a deep take here. The original Kemet is a different copy entirely. Then they had Kemet Blood and Sand as well as an expansion. I have both of those in their full versions of the Kickstarter campaign. But then we also have the prototype components for Kemet Rise of Gods, hence the different colors of the various miniatures over here. So usually I say here, all rules and components subject to change. I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But this time I'll say that some of these components are subject to change. The base game, I'm getting too complicated and confused over here. The base game is from the original Kemet. There's an expansion for Kemet, and then we also have the prototype components over here. All prototype components are subject to change, all prototype rules are subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But with that, let's talk briefly about Kemet, and then we'll talk about Kemet Rise of Gods and what that expansion adds. If you missed it already, Kemet is a game that I've very much enjoyed for a very long time. It was in my top 20 games for the first 3 or 4 years since I had it, and then it shifted out of my top 20, but it's consistently been in my top 100 games of all time ever since I first played the game. You can check out my full review of the original game, or I don't remember if it's the original game. I think I reviewed the original Kemet, and then they had Kemet Blood and Sand, which is the updated version of Kemet, which is where they introduced one of the expansions, which is again to a longer deep take here. The original expansion had 2 expansions. Ta-Seti and Seth were the 2 expansions. When they redid it, they kind of incorporated aspects of Ta-Seti into the game, leaving out the priest tracks, incorporating the onyx power tiles, and then they had another expansion from there. This is getting way in over your heads if you don't already know what Kemet is. So to that end, what is Kemet Blood and Sand? Kemet Blood and Sand, in short, 60-second take over here, and then we'll dive into the expansion, is an area control game where there's a heavy focus on powers. The entire game is about these power tiles over here, rows and rows of power tiles that players are buying from a fixed marketplace where they all have access to these tiles, but they're going to be raising these pyramids in the various colors of the power tiles in order to be able to buy and purchase those power tiles that will help them out becoming more and more powerful as they try to take control of the board. You're going to be getting points in the game. You're going to be getting permanent points and temporary points. Permanent points will come from things like battles. So when you initiate and win a battle, you'll get permanent victory points. When you control multiple temples at the end of each round, you'll get permanent victory points. But there's also temporary victory points, which will still count towards your total. The difference is those can be taken away at any point. If you control a temple at any point, that's a temporary victory point. When someone else takes it from you, they get the temporary victory point. When you have a level 4 pyramid, it's a temporary victory point because someone can march into your city and take away your level 4 pyramid. So you have to be mindful of the balance of permanent and temporary points while you try to get as many points as possible to win the game. That's a very high-level overview of it, but a key focus of Kemet is going to be these tons of power tiles over here. We're going to have the red, which are very aggressive military power tiles. We have the blue, which are defensive. We have the white, which are economy, and then we have the onyx ones over here, which are a bit of a jack of all trades, giving you a little bit of touch of everything. One of the fun things about Kemet are going to be the creatures in the game, where all the various power tiles, or from the power tiles, some in each color are going to give you specific creatures, and those creatures will give various abilities and strength, adding them to the link troop that you have. And these creatures are fun both because of the visual presence on the table, but also because it's fun and cool and powerful to have those extra abilities, whether it's extra movement, whether you instantly kill 2 units upon attacking somebody, whatever the abilities and powers are. There's a ton of fun in trying to find the right combination of gathering the right power tiles so you can take out your opponents and take control of the board. That's kind of what the original Kemet is. Now we have over here the new expansion, Rise of Gods. And the Rise of Gods expansion adds a few things, but the first and most notable that is not on the table is there is a big box expansion over here to this. There's a big box that will give you all your Kemet stuff in a single box, all the various power tiles, and there are a lot at this point. But the big box, I don't have access to that in the prototype. You can check out the campaign page. I believe there's already a video of one of the prototypes or early versions of it being unboxed, so if you want to check it out, should be content or coverage around that, just unfortunately not on this table over here. So I don't have a copy of the prototype, the prototype big box, but there will be a big box for your Kemet game. Additionally, there's going to be additional game modes, additional power tiles, as well as the God mode, which is a module to the game or whatnot. We'll get into all of that. But we're going to start off with is, if you played Kemet, you'll know that there are these little areas over here, which are variable depending on the player count. This one disappears at early player counts, and this one always stays in play in your copy because that is something that exists only for a 6th player, which we now have. We now have a 6th player over here to Kemet, so this expansion is going to add is 6 player. I should also say that I haven't played with the 6 players. I barely like him at 5, honestly. To me, 3 and 4 are my favorite player counts. 5 is already starting to get a little crowded, and 6 I haven't tried and don't plan on trying anytime soon. It's also going to add a team mode, and again, I'm sorry about this, but some of the new stuff over here I haven't tried, so I just can't give you information or opinion around those. But I have not tried the team mode of Kemet, but there is a new team mode being introduced in the Rise of Gods expansion, and that'll give you the way to play Kemet with, well, teams. If you want to play a 2 versus 2 or 3 versus 3 or head to head, whatever it is, you now have a new way or method of playing Kemet that I can't give you any information on. I mean, I've read the rules to it, but I can't tell you how the game feels. There's also going to be a solo mode, and again, that one I can tell you loosely some aspects of it in terms of the way it's going to operate. You're going to be operating as a 2-player game. You're going to have specific challenges. There are specific objective cards over here that will give you specific number of turns and things you're trying to do, and then you have a bit of an AI deck as far as how the enemies operate, and a few small rules adjustments. But again, ultimately I haven't played it, so I can only tell you loosely about how it plays without really getting into my thoughts and opinions on it. Now that we've told you all the various things I can talk to you about, I can't show you a big box, I haven't played the team, solo, or 6 player, so what can I tell you? What can I talk about this game? And honestly, for me, I think the most fun things about the expansion, although that might vary depending on who you are and what you're looking for from an expansion to Kemet. The things I can tell you about over here are going to be the 2 new power tiles over here. We have 2 new power tiles in play. We're going to have the amber tiles and the amethyst tiles, 2 new sets, and we'll loosely talk about them. I'll give you some examples of some of the abilities, but this is going to be the 2 new power sets, which means from the original game, we have, well, original Kemet's going to have the red, blue, and white, which again is military, is attacking, defense, and economy. Then we added onyx power tiles in the original expansion, which was I want to say Ta-Seti. The original Ta-Seti expansion added the onyx power tiles, and those made their way into the core box of Blood and Sand to become a permanent part of Kemet. Then we have the new expansion tiles over here, these green ones, which are going to heavily involve sacrifice, and these are from the new expansion to Kemet that was in the original Blood and Sand campaign, where they have these new gods you can get. The level 4 tiles have 2 gods you can have, and you can either have your Cthulhu gods or non-Cthulhu gods, depending on which version you wanted. Same rules, just different sculpts and art for them. But you're going to have this heavy focus and theme on sacrifice in those power tiles that's going to give you a new way to kind of lean into getting everything you want as far as all the abilities, the power, the economy, but with a heavy aspect and flavor of sacrifice being built into how the green power tiles operate. But again, that's not from the new expansion over here. And then we have the new ones over here, and the Amethyst expansion over here. The Amethyst is going to be focused very heavily. It's actually, if you did play the original Seth, it's very much a adjusted version of Seth's power tiles. So Seth was a 1 versus many expansion to the original Kemet, in which it's a great game, but it's very, 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 very long. Too long, unfortunately. But Seth had his own power tiles. These are an adjusted version of Seth's power tiles to make them more accessible and balanced around the general game state, but it kind of takes that. And to an extent, it also operates as a bit of a 1 versus many. Meaning, I don't know if there's a strong sense or feeling that I get from the Seth power tiles, contrasted with the Onyx power tiles. Both of them feel like they're trying to lean a bit into attacking, a bit into defending, a bit into creatures, and a bit into economy, kind of giving you a little bit of that 1 versus many feel. And then we have the Amber power tiles, which very much do feel distinctive in their own right. The Amber power tiles introduce a new mechanic to the game called servants. Servants are going to be kind of similar to creatures in the sense that they are a linked troop that gets added to your unit. So if you have a unit of troops in the game, you can have 1 creature added to each troop. You could also have 1 servant added to each troop. And they're similar to troops to creatures in the sense they give you an ability. They are different in the sense they don't have their own inherent strength or stats. They're not adding their own military might plus an ability. Rather, they are just adding an ability. And they are or can be very fun abilities. So for example, this one over here is going to be that you can convert your shield symbols to blood at the end of combat, which really lets you pivot or adjust around how you're going to play. And again, if you haven't played Kemet, that won't make that much sense, but if you have played Kemet, you're like, oh my gosh, that seems really cool, because it is really cool. There are a lot of fun ability tiles in both the Amethyst and the Amber. They'll give you more ways to combine and give you what power tiles you want, or the combination of powers you're trying to seek out, in order to figure out the best combination that's going to either break the game or give you a leg up over your opponents. Speaking of which, if you don't already know Kemet, the way it's basically structured is you will have a variable number of power tiles in the game depending on the player count. The more players, the more sets of power tiles you have, and you can pick and choose either randomly or with intent from the now 7 sets of power tiles that you have. 7 different distinct sets of power tiles, 3 with a very clear focus, 1 with a focus on sacrifice, 1 with a focus on servants, creatures, and a little bit of military, and then 2 that feel a little bit of a jack of all trades, but giving you different powers and abilities within that jack of all trades aspect. So despite being a little bit catch-all, they still have different abilities, different powers going on in the game. So that's going to be the other thing that's added over there to the game, and a big part of what's added. The last thing The last thing is going to be the gods themselves. The name of the expansion is The Rise of the Gods, and you're going to have actual gods in this expansion. I have a sampling of some of them. I do not have all of them, but we basically have some of these gods over here, and the way the god structure works is it operates as its own individual troop unit. It's not a creature. It can't be attached to units. It can't have its own servant or creatures or units or any of that. It operates as its own independent unit on the board that has its own military strength, which is going to be on these cards over here. You're going to have a recruitment cost of 4 prayer points for it, and then you have its own military strength, its own abilities, and then also its health dial over here, which when it kind of functions similar to having a unit of troops, where wherever you would lose a unit, you instead lose health on your god. Your gods have a limited point of when they can be brought into the game, which depending on the player count, depending on the team mode or whatnot, is when you hit 4 points. Whenever one player has 4 points, then at that point the gods cannot be brought into the game, effectively meaning that they can't be shown up way too early. But once there's a certain critical mass of gameplay, you can start recruiting your gods and bringing them into play, and they operate as their own unit with their own powers, their own abilities. When they die, they can be brought back. So it's basically kind of this giant new threat players have to both deal with and then use to their advantage at the same time. You're going to have your own god with their own abilities. You're trying to use them. You're going to be mindful of your opponent and how they're using their god and their abilities, all while you try to juggle your various forces in the game, now being added to the creatures as well as the servants on top of everything else. So there is a lot going on once you introduce the gods. At that point, this feels like a good point to transition from what the expansion adds to how I feel about the various elements. And again, I haven't done the team mode, solo mode, or 6-player, and I don't have the big box, so unfortunately 4 things are kind of a little bit out the door as far as my ability to talk about those things comprehensively. What I can talk about is the new power tiles. And to that end, I'll say that I'll also talk about the green power tiles as well, because I finally play with those. Those are something I have not played with a while. I don't think I've ever talked with them. But going into the new sets of power tiles, the last expansion and the 2 new ones, the green power tiles, sacrificial tiles, I like them a lot. And again, it's not actually the Rise of the Gods expansion. I'm just talking about them while I'm here. But overall, I like the principle and how they feel very uniquely different. One of the nice things about the original core power tiles in Kemet is the fact that you have this very clear distinction of the various 3 trees of attack, defense, and economy. Then you have the Onyx power tiles, which felt like a nice element of a little bit of a jack of all trades. Like, hey, we're adding a new color, but it we have the 3 pillars in place, so what are we going to do? Well, this will be a little bit of everything. If you choose to specialize in black, you're not focusing on any one thing, you have access to a lot of different things, and of course new creatures, which is always fun in its own right. The sacrificial tiles are tricky in the sense that I kind of like what they're doing, but I don't have a firm grasp on how to play them well yet. You're focusing a lot on sacrificing units and trading in those sacrificial units for a variety of things, and then working your way up to these 2 divinities. Divinities are not gods, by the way, don't get confused over there. Divinities are also giant creatures that are not really creatures and not really gods. They're kind of halfway steps specific to those tiles over there. But I like the concept of the green power tiles are going for, but I don't know if I firmly have a good sense of how to play them yet. So right now I'm kind of in a like them with an asterisk kind of place. I want to dive into it more. I want to get a sense of how they play more by playing them more. But right now I'm kind of intrigued, but not yet totally sold on them. Which I guess brings us to the new power tiles. We're talking about the Amethyst and the Amber power tiles. The Amethyst, again, it's a good thing. They don't feel, despite me constantly saying that the Onyx and the Amethyst are both jack of all trades, they don't feel the same at all. They just kind of do touch upon different elements of the game in terms of they both have the economy, the military, the defense. They have all those things going on, but they lean into them very, very differently, giving you different things that you can do. And the Amethyst tiles do feel suitably powerful, giving you a bunch of things to do in terms based on the extra actions. You have the golden actions, which is a way to get extra action in the game. The various creatures you'll get, they feel distinct. It's going to focus heavily on giving you a lot of the oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the token, but you get these new tokens, these veteran tokens or whatnot. I think it's called the veteran tokens. So they have new ways of getting those. They lean into other mechanics that were kind of introduced in the Kemet Blood and Sand, giving you more ways to incorporate and adjust around those, but they do feel nice to have. And again, if you've played the original Seth, some of them will feel familiar. They feel tuned down and adjusted, but I like the Amethyst power tiles, with the caveat that I'm not like blown away with them because it still feels a bit jack of all trades. Versus the Amber tiles, I love the Amber tiles. The Amber tiles feels like it did manage to lean into a distinctive feel in terms of how you incorporate the Amber tiles into your game. It feels like there's a very strong focus on the servants, on creatures, and then on battle elements. There's a few, maybe 1 or 2 tiles that aren't perfectly in that trifecta, but it very much does feel it's servants, creatures, and then elements of battle resolution, movement, retreat, things like that. And so it doesn't feel like it's leaning into battle the same way the military faction is, but rather it feels like it's leaning into battle support. Like if I had to define the Amber faction, it would be battle support. Not battle strength, not battle defense, not economy. It's battle support, and it does feel distinct. They managed to take a new faction tiles over there, a new set of grouping of tiles, and make them feel distinct without compromising on, well, the rest of the game elements. And that's going to be a thing you have to manage when you play through the game, because when you sit there and you try to think through which elements, which power tiles do I incorporate? If I'm playing with 3 power tile sets, which ones do I use? Because if you go with the original blue, red, and white, you have a classic attack, defense, and economy, and you got your bases covered. As soon as you remove one of those, what are you substituting in? If you remove the red power tiles, you're going to have a very different game, a very less aggressive game, but you might be able to tilt that aggression back up by including both the Onyx and the Amethyst, because you'll have enough things going on that if you combine the Onyx, the Amethyst, and let's say the Amber tiles, you'll have a good degree of battle support with its own structure. You'll have 2 separate tile sections of Jack of all trades, so you still kind of have your bases covered, but it's a slightly less aggressive game than a purely red game, which is one of the things that I really like about the sheer variety of power tiles you have access to now, is it opens up the door more and more to different feelings of the game, meaning there's 2 main benefits of the power tiles. The first is the sheer variety. One of the things that Kemet is a little weak at is as you play it more and more, if you're just playing with the original 3 sets, you're constantly going to find yourself falling into patterns. I like these tiles from this set and these, and I really like the economy that white provides over here, so I'll get these 2 and that, and there are combinations you'll start to go for. Now, you can't always get them. Other players might get there first. You'll have to adapt and adjust to what the game is doing, but overall, the original game will let you fall into patterns of what works for you. The more power tile sets you have access to, and the way you don't have access to all of them at once, forces you to re-examine. Your decisions of what to get in terms of the blue defensive tiles is going to be different if red's in play. I keep doing this. If red's in play versus if you have no red and instead you're focusing on sacrifice and the amethyst tiles, and together with blue, you're going to be choosing different blue tiles to complement that set. And so I really like that the game forces you to re-examine different elements over there, different elements of what you want to choose strategically. But then more importantly, or just as importantly, I like the fact that it forces a different feeling to the game. Diving into the game with no aggressive tiles. If you dive into the game with blue, with economy, and with support, you're going to have a very, very different game because you have no real aggression inherently built in outside of the creatures you can rally and an occasional power tile here or there. And so I like how different power tile sets will change the feel of the way Kemet plays. And so the additional variety that they add is very, very nice. And again, I do like, or I'm intrigued by the sacrificial tiles, by the green set. I'm not as completely sold by them. They feel almost separate from the rest. All of these feel like they can enmesh themselves pretty decently. The green ones feel like they really operate, while they do have their own unique feel, which is a good thing there, again, going back to the original 3 sets and then the amber now, I do think the green ones have a very distinct flavor and feel, but whereas the other ones have a distinct flavor and feel, but they feel like they all enmesh together, the sacrificial tiles feel a little bit like you kind of want to lean into them heavily and focus heavily around those, work your way up to the divinities, and if you're not doing that, you may as well not dabble in them at all. At least that's my initial sense of things. I could be wrong with that, but that's my sense of from having played them so far. As far as the Rise of the Gods expansion, which is the Rise of the Gods module, which is the name of the expansion or whatnot, I like it. I like it. I like the gods. The gods are a nice thing. It's nice to have these gods marching around the map, but I can't say that it really strongly changed, just having more power tiles was a much bigger boon to how the game feels to me in terms of the variety, the experience, the different feelings than the gods themselves. There's nothing wrong with the gods, and I think I'd probably use them most of the time when I play, not necessarily with new players because it's an additional thing to manage on a game that's already a little overwhelming, but I think with established players to the game, I'd usually use the gods because it's nice to have a big, lunking giant, effectively a creature that's operating on its own, who's marching around the map with his own abilities and just taking people out. It's something else to manage and be mindful of, and I like that little element that it adds. I just don't think of it as a full-on expansion. Like, it's the name of the expansion, I get that. It's the name, the Rise of the Gods and all that. But it doesn't feel like an expansion so much as like it almost feels like a Kickstarter bonus. Like, hey, by the way, and this is on GameFound, I should say, not Kickstarter, but on GameFound. But it almost feels like a little bonus. Like, hey, by the way, back this game and get the little Rise of the Gods module, and it's a fun little thing you can add to your game. It doesn't feel like a giant change. It just feels like a fun little addition. And so, as far as expansion overall thoughts, with everything going on here, again, we have big box team mode, solo mode, and 6-player, none of which I can talk about because I have access to some but haven't played them, and don't have access to others. As far as the new power tiles and the Rise of the Gods, I like the power tiles a lot. They really add to the experience, in my opinion, even though it's just more, but the way some games will give you more, and it's like, oh great, I previously could have played as 10 different characters, now I can play as 15 different characters, and that's nice, but it's not necessarily a real change to the experience. When Kemet gives you more in the sense of more power tiles, just these whole rows of tiles, it really changes up the experience drastically and forces you to re-examine the game in a way that I think dear Lord, I'm going to move this over here, in a way that I think it really, really adds to the experience, especially if you find yourself playing Kemet at any reasonable pace. If you're playing Kemet, a few times a year, having those power tiles will really will elongate the experience, will give you more variety to the experience, will give it so that you get not necessarily bored, but you don't fall into patterns. You don't fall into patterns when you play Kemet, and that it can feel differently every single time. So I'm a huge fan of the power tiles, and the Gods expansion is nice to have. As far as final thoughts and rating on this, I'm going to give the Kemet to me as a general game is a 5 out of 5 game. I like it a lot. I've enjoyed this game so much for so long. It is an amazing experience that I always have fun playing. The expansion, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. And to be clear, the way I rate expansions is based on what they add to the game. Meaning Kemet is still a 5 out of 5 game. The expansion to me is a 4.5 out of 5. It feels like a bunch of disparate elements, some of which I'll benefit from, some of which I won't. I don't imagine I will play the team mode or the solo mode or the 6-player mode. Meaning when I say I haven't covered them, it's not just a lack of access, it's just that I'm not going to dive into those. I'm less likely to dive into those. I find team modes in games that aren't built around it, I usually don't dive into. Solo modes in games that are meant to be more multiplayer to begin with, I usually don't dive into. And that leaves the 6-player, which I'm almost certainly not going to use, because even at 5 players, I find Kemet slows down. So for me, a lot of the elements of the expansion I just won't benefit from, but what I will benefit from is very much those power tiles, and that alone is worth it, and the Gods is a nice addition to have. So a 4.5 out of 5. And hopefully that was helpful in some degree. Again, I apologize for the elements of the expansion I can't give you more thoughts and opinions on, but I want to be able to talk about the things I properly experienced and not the things I didn't. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.